Szaga miseczna, zorana jasna, ja widna chociolki zbieraj. Widy, kochana, ja pracę już zmorena, choć na chwilinę kuchaj.
What a year we're having, and what about 3 years? I thought it would all get better. Actually, I knew it wouldn't, because I knew they'd have to produce something else after COVID. So guess what they do? They bring up Ukraine. Anyway, I'm here with Alice Grant, and we have different perspectives on things. But anything we say may not be true. At the moment, they're of course trying to get us back into the EU.
Yes.
And I think that's why they put the yellow and blue flags everywhere suddenly, psychologically. Okay,
that's a very good
because
point.
suddenly,
That's a very good point.
yes,
They are
suddenly they
definitely,
put on top of number 10 a yellow and blue flag, as if we've ever cared about the Ukraine before.
Yes, exactly. They're weaponizing this issue. They're starting to push the further integration into the EU is the only way we can be saved. But actually, what I see here is that the EU doesn't stand a chance against Russia and her allies, which is China, and quite frankly, what we see on a geopolitical level is the dwindling economic power and political power of the US, which was once obviously this unipolar, had this global hegemony and dominance over world politics, and the EU, on the other hand, which are also a disintegrating power. And instead, we see the rise of China and Russia. And in truth, there's no way that we can combat this.
And there was a mass fear of communism in the early 50s.
There still is.
No, not like it was, because after 1945, when the war was won, by whom is the interesting thing,
Yes.
or Hitler lost the war then, right, that basically Russia walked in from the east to Berlin, the Western America and the West walked into Berlin as well, and obviously when America and everyone else left, all the countries were free, but when Russia got to Berlin, they suddenly took over the whole of Eastern Europe, and every country was run by them. So there was a mass fear of communism then, and it was for obvious reasons, but it was basically Russia. I mean, you can call it what you want, but it wasn't just communism, it was basically Russia. I mean, Chinese is communist officially now, which is debatable.
Yeah, but what's funny is we're always hearing all the time how, Russia is losing, Russia is a problem, Russia. I honestly believe that there's a major problem with actually billionaires now, because they're ruling the world. It doesn't matter whether they're in Russia or whether they're in the rest of the world, they are trying to rule it.
Yes, there's this global elite.
Yes.
And there's also then, of course, the interests of the people, which are two very different things.
Yes, they're very different
What I find
things.
especially interesting in this conflict is that obviously on the most basic level we can see that, okay, so it's between Ukraine and Russia, but actually what's really going on here, and you can see this on a macro level, which is fascinating, is that there's also this emerging combat between these two financial systems. The US dollar and its financial system, which has had this grip on the world and has established and fortified the US as the supreme kind of power.
And it was
power.
based against the oil as well. Yeah. So of course,
and then we
petrodollar.
Yes, exactly. And then we have the emerging Chinese empire, which itself has now established a financial system. So these sanctions, which we've just imposed on Russia, which is supposedly SWIFT, getting rid of Russia from SWIFT. So that obviously
Yeah, but
will
you can sell money.
curtail them a lot.
Exactly, but I just thought this was absolutely ridiculous.
What's fascinating is that China have established their own financial system, and yes, it's in its nascent stages, but this is the future, and Russia have China as an ally.
Oh my God, the Chinese! Yes, certain people have kind of worries about it, but not in any major way.
I think China's a major problem because everything is run by China. China's taken over, bought whole parts of America, whole parts of the land around the world, and they have all the rights over many things like drugs. They've got problems with the pharmaceutical industry being attached to China and being made in China. So there are lots of problems with communism, or their form of communism, whatever it is.
Well, it's capitalist communism.
Yeah,
It's part communist,
well,
part
that's
capitalist.
that's what Russia is a bit.
That's right. It's
Yes.
exactly the same. There's not much difference in it.
No.
And they've both got authoritarian
But I don't think
leaders.
America's any better. I think that America...
I do, actually. I think it's a lot better. Because America, when there's a troublemaker in the world, they will go and actually get not always, but they'll go and get the dictator out and eventually leave.
While we have been basically committing the ultimate self-sabotage, we've been demilitarizing, decarbonising, we have been degrading ourselves culturally over here in the West. Russia have been building themselves up. They've been building out their industries. They've been, under Putin, we've seen a lot of social cohesion in Russia. We're seeing, I guess, the way that Britain used to be pre-World War One.
Exactly. So what do you think that Putin has actually achieved for Russia?
Well, he's been very aggressive in his foreign policy, but also very, very stern and firm with it, because obviously, as we know that ultimately this conflict has been caused by NATO. The long-term cause of the present-day invasion of Ukraine has been aggressive NATO expansion.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is that Russia has always made her position clear and said, this, Ukraine and any troops placed in Ukraine would be a very severe military security risk to Russia, and we will not have this. Of course, it makes sense. Like, America governs the Western Hemisphere, as Professor Mearsheimer was saying. Russia has obviously very vested interests in the countries which occupy its western border. So the fact that NATO has been slowly since the 90s really expanding and consuming and swallowing up these nations which literally border Russia, I mean, is obviously very worrying to Russia, understandably. And after numerous times where Putin has made his position clear, it's happened now. So the West, the kind of surprise and confusion we see is only because of a deep misunderstanding of what has gone on.
But what Russia has done is diabolical. Do you know what I mean? To walk into Ukraine, how dare they? NATO aren't shipping arms to the border of Russia. They're just saying, fine, we'll make a pact. Oh, but Russia, because they don't respect democracy, Putin is not elected. He's abolished democracy and says, I'm, the ultimate absolute monarch, the same as the Tsar. He doesn't say those words, but that's what he is. So it's like, how dare they make a pact? We're walking. It's nothing to do with a pact. It's an excuse because Russia is up to its old tricks and walking into everyone's countries again because that's how they are.
I always thought of the Ukraine, and you can answer this, was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Suddenly we're hearing that they're the angels from the sky.
Exactly.
I'm a bit confused.
And Zelensky's this amazing hero.
Yeah, and then we see him, wearing red high heels and dancing. Not that I mind all this stuff because I'm actually very pro LGBT XYZ, but the truth is he is a character, and he is actually the puppet supposedly of Ihor Kolomoisky. Exactly. That these people have a lot of money. He's a huge oligarch.
Yes,
he's meant to have diddled the people of the Ukraine out of millions of dollars, pounds, and also he owned all the television stations, so it was complete propaganda over there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's complete propaganda here too, all over the West, and even in Russia. The thing is that we cannot trust the media whatsoever. We have to look at the facts, the economic facts. We have to look at the markets and see what's going on there, because then you realise the fact that, everything has, strategic motive behind it.
Russia The point is they walked into the Crimea and everyone let them do it, just as they let Hitler do it in the 30s.
Yes, because
It's exactly the same as the Nazis.
No. The other side is saying, Putin is saying there were mass killings along in those areas of Ukraine.
What do you mean?
Because there's a lot of anti. I suppose they don't like half Russian, half Ukrainians, and all those people have been killed. There were about 14,000 people killed about 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Well, 3 years ago? Why wouldn't they have declared war 3 years ago? But suddenly now...
Well, they have, you see. The thing is, this is not just brewing now. This has been going for 20 years.
Well, then why did they walk into the Crimea then? What were the mass killings in the Crimea?
Because they can, because Biden isn't strong enough. We've got a dodo in the White House.
Yeah, but that's not an answer to the question. You say he's not strong enough, but they are strong enough to stand up to Russia now and supply weapons to
they're
Ukraine.
not. They're not doing dick shit. They could
are.
go in there.
They're 100% supplying weapons to the Ukraine.
Yeah, but that's no use if you can't use them. You have to be able to use these weapons.
But the thing is, if we leave Russia do this, then the next one will be Belarus or Poland or something like that. They'll walk into the next country. They're going to keep on doing it because Russia has got this, they're the biggest country in the world.
The main thing is we need to have fight for peace right now. And
fighting for peace is standing up for Ukraine, which is why I'm wearing this. What this sign should have said was "fuck Russia," but the point is to stop Russia.
I think the point is actually just to stop. We need to just stop everything.
Well, we are stopping everything. We're economically boycotting Russia.
Fair play to the European nations. I think we do have economic power, but without raw materials, that comes to nothing.
And also, Ukraine is very, very valuable. It, produces wheat, it produces eggs, basic things like chickens. Yeah. I mean, it produces more than everywhere else in Europe. But in any case, to try and turn a whole lot of Ukrainians into Europeans is a very difficult thing. It's like bringing Romanians into England. Yeah. We're very, very different, and we all have to integrate, of course. But this is huge integration. I don't think it would really work.
It's madness,
yes.
Amanda. It's madness, and the reason why is because not only does Ukraine have such deep historical ties to Russia, and many of them are ethnically Russian in Ukraine. They speak the Russian language, especially in the Donbass region. And we know that these regions essentially voted to be autonomous from both Russia and Ukraine. And that hasn't been respected. That was enshrined in the Minsk Treaty. That wasn't respected by Ukraine. Well, they didn't stick to the Minsk
Treaty at all.
No, not at all. The Ukrainian government, and together with its military, of which many of its elements are fascist forces,
yes,
as we all know, they completely disrespected that treaty. And of course, Putin, as part of his, or as stated by him, he sees that part of his kind of reason for targeting Ukraine is also to protect these people, many of whom are Russian ethnically. So yes. I don't know how much truth there is in his claim that he's protecting these people. And they're appealing to emotion, which is understandable. I think obviously I do feel extremely, my heart is with the Ukrainian people who have had, who have been subject to this violence. But at the same time, we have to be clear about this and look at what's in Britain's interests, because that is my priority. My priority is Britain, and my priority is peace. And what I see is that this stoking of tensions that we've seen from Boris Johnson is deeply irresponsible. And this kind of, trying to see if you can tame and subdue Russia, it's not going to happen.
Well, they know that.
I know, exactly. They know that, and it's funny because, at the same time, do NATO want to be involved? Do we really want to go to World War III over Ukraine?
Nobody wants to go to war.
No, because Ukraine is not of strategic interest at the end of the day. Yes, okay, there's vested interests from Biden, but ultimately, Ukraine and Eastern Europe, that has very little to do with our island here. And we've already got a lot of problems that we need to deal with. So it just seems ridiculous that people have been radicalised by the media into actually wanting to go to war. I mean, how mad do you have to be to think that's an acceptable solution to this? More fighting, more death, and especially when Putin has been very open with the fact that he has nuclear power and he's willing to use it.
And I believe him.
Believe him, because one thing about Putin, unlike Western leaders, he's very clear about what he's going to do, and he says it and then he does it. And it's the same even with China to some degree. I mean, earlier in February 4th, Moscow, Beijing came out with a joint declaration saying that their partnership, their international partnership, was unlimited. What should that tell us? That should tell us, okay,
well, they
we're
don't
coming
want
up
somebody
against...
bossing them around like America, which is a faded power.
Yeah, America can do wrong, but I'm alive because of America. America came in 1941 actually, and they helped fight the war, and they did the same in the First World War.
Why don't you like
actually?
the
Can I
Russians?
say something? I've got nothing against Russians.
Okay,
I've never
okay.
thought about Russians.
Okay, so
but let me
let's
just
take
tell you
that.
something. One of the reasons I'm sitting here is because of Russia. Why? Because my father was born in Poland, right? And the point was that all the pogroms, you know, a pogrom is a purge against Jews. Well, somebody watching this might not, you might know, but somebody watching this might not know. So all the pogroms that happened through Poland was because Poland was taken over by Russia. Oh, that's such a coincidence. Lithuania was where my mother's family were from, and they had to run away from there because Russia controlled Lithuania. Now, at the moment, they're free for the moment. So NATO has to be stronger because Russia is showing quite clearly what they're up to.
You say, I think it's all because of Biden.
It's not bad enough. It's not enough for them. They're the biggest country in the world. They have to have world expansion so they can control the whole world. Well, they ain't going to control me, thanks. And if NATO has to be strong. Has Poland got loads of missiles pointed at Russia? No. Because Russia wants to dominate, and they will always find an excuse to dominate, right? So that is the point. But we were talking about why I'm here. So my grandparents ran away from Russian domination of Poland, of Lithuania, because of all the anti-Semitic things. And the joke is that Putin now says, "Oh, the Ukrainians are Nazis." That's the farce. And that's what Russia's acting like Nazis. So they're going, look, the Ukrainians are Nazis because they know they're the Nazis. They are Nazis.
You know, I feel sorry on another level. You know, the oligarchs. You know, I know quite a few oligarchs. And although we don't feel very sorry for them, because of course they've got billions to go through. I mean, actually, to take their houses, take their boats, they're very happy that they supported the whole of Sloane Street all this time and Bond Street and supported our property market and supported our boat building facilities. They're very happy that the south of France, they went round the world, you know, using the ports of south of France, Sardinia, and now they're all having everything stolen. I think it's an appalling thing. 500,000 people have lost their jobs through the confiscation of little goodies from the Russian people.
Yeah, it's doing nothing.
And they're accused of black marketeering and all sorts of things, you know. But they might not have been. I mean, you know, it needs to go to court. It needs to be checked because you can easily go... I mean, I'm very upset personally about Abramovich. I always thought actually Abramovich was a bit of a hero. You know, he took over Chelsea. It was a bit of a... I hate to say it, a second-rate sort of football company. And now it's first-rate and it's going to close in 3 weeks if they don't find a buyer. All sorts of things like this will happen. It's a salami effect. It's very, very, very disingenuous of all of us to attack people that we were very happy to support us. It's disgusting.
Money can go very quickly. If you've got no market, suddenly everything dries up and they're confiscating all their property here.
You know what they're doing right now?
What?
They're just going next door.
What do you mean?
They go next door to China or next door to wherever else.
The only thing is with China, they know if they go too far that China, although they call themselves communists, they are capitalist in a huge way. And the point is, a huge amount of the money they make comes from the West, you know, made in Hong Kong, made in this, whatever. And they don't want to lose all their markets like Russia is losing. Russia's not losing some of them, it's losing all of them in the West. So fine, it might not lose China, whatever.
If I was Russia, I'd never want to go. If I was a Russian woman right now, I would remember all of this, and I'd never go into a Valentino shop ever again.
That's so true. And as you were saying, on a wider point about all these kind of sanctions and the response from the West, from the EU, from the UK. Ultimately, who is this targeting? Who are these sanctions targeting? They're targeting the people, and they're specifically designed, especially in Russia, to cause insurrection and insurgents. But I would also be adamant that Ukraine remains a neutral nation between Russia and the West, because it needs to be. It needs to be, and the reason why, and our failure to ensure that it remained a buffer between Russia and Europe is why this has happened.
Yeah.
NATO's aggressive expansionist policy, America's imperialistic ambitions, And of course it's resulted in this aggressive retaliation from Putin. And, you know, ultimately if these people genuinely, if Biden, if Boris, if they really cared about Ukrainian lives, they would have ensured that none of this, that Ukraine would have remained neutral, none of this would have happened.
So you were given the opportunity to put it all right. So basically you've got to get religion.
Yeah, of course, Christ the King has to reign.
Okay. And how will the Jews feel?
Because, well, the Jewish people are part of the kind of what it says in the New Testament is that they have to convert ultimately.
Basically, there is no religion, and that is the problem. There is no... and
because what's interesting in Russia, of course, is that Putin has, along with, you know, reviving Russian industries and taking a completely different approach from his communist predecessors like Lenin and Stalin. In fact, you know, he's very much against all that. He's been reviving Russian Orthodoxy.
Yes.
And that has been an enormous factor in creating social unity in Russia. And, you know, the thing is that if we really think that Russia is going to suffer because they don't have Nike or Pornhub or Twitter anymore, it's a joke.
Or Facebook.
Facebook. Like, no, I'm sorry, but actually, all the better for them.
I know they were laughing about, you know, McDonald's and all the awful imports we've done.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's be honest, it's not got a good Chanel.
Walk into two countries in turn. It's just a matter of time before Russia walks into the next country for an excuse.
You don't think America's manipulating this?
Not at all. America wants there to be, because they're the height of capitalism, they just want there to be one big capitalist market where no one's controlling everyone. It's a free market where people, you know, everything finds its right level in the marketplace, not where there's these dominating dictators who control the market. It's the last thing America wants.
That's what they've been for the last 3 years.
What have?
America's been dominating our pharmaceutical market by obliging everybody to go off and have injections, having...
what do you mean obliging everyone?
Well, they're actually making everything mandatory. Yes, they are. They've actually made it almost mandatory.
Only if you want to go to another country. If you stay in the country you're in, you don't have to have a vaccination. No. But if you want to go abroad, that's another story.
Exactly.
Well, that's another story. Well, fine, then don't go abroad. But they're saying that. That's their choice. I don't care.
Basically, do you think that it can change? You know, we're heading along a very quick road to absolute... devastation.
Wow.
And it's going to be devastation. Everybody, my father once said to me, don't worry, stop worrying about these things. It never happens in Paris, London or New York. But I'm sorry, it is happening. Yes, it's happening financially. You know, you can see by
the world's getting crazier. They're getting more desperate to enforce their 2030 agenda, and this is the result.
Okay, so
but ultimately, the Immaculate Heart will triumph. So pray the Rosary.
Yes, okay. So we're going to. We've got 7 years before 2030, where it's the total reset.
Well, they've been speeding it along. I think COVID helped. Now, of course, they utilise any crisis really. So any opportunity they have to forward it on, to push forward. And we have to be like that too. We have to be just as militant as they are, but for fighting for the truth, for fighting for justice.
For truth and freedom of thought. I mean, look at Assange lying in jail.
Can you imagine?
Okay, so we haven't had a war, but we're heading to it. And do you think that this war will be still continuing in a year?
It really all depends whether Zelensky comes to his senses.
But that's totally different to somebody wanting world domination, which is what the communist regime wanted after the second, when Hitler lost the war. They did that business as they've always done, Russia, and we're right back to the good old days. Nothing's changed. Right?
I think America's just into domination as they are.
No, they're into capitalist domination, which is about being a free spirit where you're not dominated by one big world leader. Do you know what I mean? And that's what Russia would like. So what do you think about Putin abolishing democracy? And he says no person can stand for president there for years until he ever decides to go. You think that's right? It's disgusting.
But also if the EU comes to their senses, because at the moment, as we can see, the EU have basically been encouraging Zelensky, which is just ridiculous. I mean, he thinks that he can have the military backup of NATO and of the US and of the EU.
But
it's not going to happen. They're lying to him. They're encouraging him, and in his foolishness, really, he thinks that the Ukraine can somehow fight this out. They can't. They really can't. And I mean, time will tell. But
rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Britain never, never, never shall be slaves. I mean, really, it's utterly ridiculous.